Hey there, I'm Shantae, and welcome to Parenting Special Needs Magazine. If you're a parent of a loved one with special needs and want to help them live independently, you will not want to miss this episode. Today, we are speaking with Reilly Pelkey, a mother and advocate, about keeping your child safe while encouraging independent living. We'll share a cautionary tale about Good Samaritans and provide insights and a few strategies to empower you and your child. Please give a warm welcome to Reilly. Welcome, Reilly. Reilly, do you want to tell her?
Mother and advocate I have a son with autism who's 25, a daughter who's 26. I have a husband, been married for 28 years, and just navigating through life and what that looks like for my son and for others and their children.
Hey, well, thank you. Welcome for being with me. So today, I know that recently you had an incident that happened with housing, right, with your son, and we're going to be talking about that. So, can you set the scene a little bit for everybody? Like I know you've worked really hard to get your son to live independently, and then
So we Clayton is my son, and again, our daughter is a year older than him, and she was 2 years ahead of him in school. We went to visit her sophomore year. It was Clayton's senior year of high school. He saw her at the University of Florida living in a dorm with her own, not a dorm, living in an apartment with friends, her own kitchen, her own everything. And when we left there, he said, "Mom, I want to do that." And so Mom said, "Okay, let me figure out how we can do that and where we can do that." Obviously, we were struggling with just graduating. So trying to find a program that was autism friendly, and also a program that would have the supports necessary for him. And ultimately, we found one in the Keys at the College of the Florida Keys. So we set him up at the college, got him in there, and thought, immediately we don't have supports like what he's going to need, or anybody's going to need to be successful here. But we went ahead and left him there and drove home and started making phone calls to try to put in those supports. And actually, he was extremely successful. There were plenty of bumps that he maneuvered through, but the one thing that he continually said is, "I want to do this on my own. I want to be independent." And my daughter described it that, Bub's down there living the life, and you are walking in front of him and he doesn't know it, and you're throwing your body on bombs to keep him from stepping on them. And that, honestly, that first year or two was very much like that, trying to maneuver through catching everything and anything before he actually was hurt by it, or harmed or whatever. And when that was done, we decided to get out of the controlled living environment and allow him to finish that third year in an apartment with two other kiddos with autism that he was friends with. And that was where his true desire for independence really expanded. I didn't hear about struggles. I would hear about them through a support. I wouldn't hear about them through my son. That was where his executive functioning started kicking in, and this is my problem, this is how I fix it. And he would fix it or think that he'd fixed it, but I couldn't throw myself on a bomb anymore because I didn't know anything. Not that he wasn't communicating, he just was working through things like most kids do, to live as successfully as possible. And he was pretty proud of himself for being able to do that. So once we got kind of confident in him and we realized, gosh, we don't have to throw ourselves on bombs all the time. He wants this. He's going to make this happen. Then it became like a different kind of support. I mean, he still has support, and we're 6 years in, but it became a different kind of support, more of a, top down, global. Does he look healthy? Is he sick? Does he have food? Those types of things, not so much.
Explain support for a second. When you say support, like, does that mean people came in and looked in on them? You had other friends, like, were, kind of checking on them? Like, what's okay?
Natural supports through the school when he was at the school. And then maybe a tutor came in who also was an in-home support that would open the refrigerator just to make sure that something wasn't rotten and growing mold, or, walk through the bathroom and make sure that it had at least been wiped down in a month. Again, every time I go, and I'm down here now, and I just walked in, and I was amazed at where he is today from where he started. But I walked in and everything's good except for the kitchen counters. And I looked at the counters and I was like, ugh. And then I talked to my husband and I'm like, well, it's not mom clean. But you know what? I can tell you, I've been in a lot of apartments of kids, my kids' age, and it's not mom clean. So, the expectation, he's a 25-year-old male living on his own, needs to be a real expectation, not a mom clean expectation.
Right.
So that's a learning thing for me. So Clayton lived with his 3 friends. He has been, again, because of who he is and what he's done, he was picked up for a full-time position with Moat Marine Laboratories. They're the leading environmental reef agency in the country, if not the world. They do reef restoration, growing coral, checking the, modifying coral as to the acidification, the warmer temperatures, doing what they can do to grow coral in different circumstances for the sustainability of the coral reefs. And then they take that coral that they grow and they transplant it out. And so Clayton has been there 2.5 years. And when he got hired on by them, he had worked for them for a year in a program, 9 months in a paid internship program, and then was hired by them. It was like a 4-hour ordeal getting there on the bus from where he was living. So 2 hours each way every day. We moved him up to Big Pine Key, 4 or 5 miles away, so he would be closer. He's just been extremely successful. They have embraced him tremendously. And I realize that's not the point of this conversation, but it is the point for people to understand, like, whenever something's happened, I think Clayton was used to leaving at 3:30 and they changed the time until 4. So when he got done with all his work, I think he left at 3:30 and he did it twice. They didn't call me and say, hey, Reilly, tell Clayton he's supposed to stay here until 4. They pulled Clayton in and said, hey, we need you here until 4. And, it's your responsibility to check in, whatever. So he's been there till 4. Like, the communication piece of the 4 p.m. didn't stick the first time. And they recognized, hey, we're going to do this 1-to-1 and he's going to understand it. And that's what they've done with him, with everything. They very much are, they're Team Clayton. Wow. And they don't treat him like he has autism. They treat him just like they treat everybody else. They have the same expectations of him as they do anybody else. They work together as a team there. You have to work together there. It's a nonprofit, so it's not like they have a multitude of people. They have key people, and Clayton works across all of their departments. So every area, whereas usually staff are put into each individual area. Clayton's a jack of all trades. So they use him wherever they need him. On Wednesdays, he does an after-school program down in Key West. for elementary school kiddos in learning about the environment and stuff. And when we were here last time, he was at the middle school for a parents' night doing a teaching thing. Like they use him just like they would anybody else.
Yeah, and that says a lot that he's able to switch between all those things, because that takes a lot for any employee to be able to switch jobs and go with the flow and work with everybody. So that's awesome.
So, that's the background of his employment. So Clayton was living in the Keys is extremely expensive in relation to other locations. So he was in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. We were able to find, it was expensive, but it was less expensive than other stuff that we had tried to find individually. So what we did was we worked with Moat, and as they would have interns come in and they didn't have housing for that intern, or people hired, they would, 3 months, 4 months stay with Clayton, and his landlord was okay with that. So months where somebody wasn't there, we were paying the difference in the rent from what he could do. But months that we could, mitigate his costs with a roommate, we did that. So during the time period that he lived there, I want to say he had probably 6 roommates, and wonderful experiences across meeting people, learning to live with people, learning different dynamics of personalities and who needs to do what. It was an incredible experience for him, along with doing that during the day. In a regular work environment where you have different people requiring things of you or needing you to do things. So we just could not have been happier. We're like, wow, he's doing this on his own. And, they're not just saying he's doing well. He's really doing well. And that brings us to last year. In April, we have a huge the Airboaters for Autism event we just had this weekend. It's a big event. We brought him home, and we raise funds for programs, other nonprofits in the state of Florida, for programs to get kids to the outdoors, get kids doing things off the sofa, off their iPad, etc. Been very successful over the last 9 years to give money out. So Clayton comes home for that. He's like our spokesman. He stands up, he talks to people, he communicates with everybody. He doesn't know a stranger. So we sent him home, and he had a fever. And I was a little concerned about him, obviously, because I'm not going to be there. So he had a fever, and that first week he got back, he wasn't feeling well, and it didn't pass. The fever passed, but he had like a chest congestion. So this is a first that we've had to navigate through. So I reached out to the local, he had a care center near him. I reached out to them. I talked to them on the phone. I talked to Clayton, sent him over there. He had like a bronchitis or something. They put him on medication. He went and picked it up. Like, again, navigating through life. He did it. I stepped it out. He did it. Everything was okay. He stayed out of work 2 or 3 days, went back, still wasn't feeling really well, but he went back to work, and he was taking Dayquil, but he went back to work, and he worked, and then it kind of relapsed. So the next week I'm on the phone with the nurses station working through that for them to check him out again. We were on it. Everybody, he had a roommate. The mom had gone and gotten Gatorade for him and waters, gotten some food items for him so he didn't have to go to the grocery store. We were on it. The neighbors there checking in on him. I'm thinking everything's great. Life is wonderful. And about 3 weeks later, we have the landlord was there fixing something, and there was a knock at the door, and Clayton wasn't even home yet. And she answered the door thinking it was the plumber for the hot water heater. And it was the Department of Children and Families. And they had I don't know if you call it a complaint or whatever. I'm going to cry. They had somebody that filed a concern or complaint against Clayton and his welfare for living, but we didn't know anything. So she has this card, and Clayton needs to call this lady. And so she reached out to me, and she said, Reilly, I told her, like, he's the best tenant I have. He pays his rent every month on time. His house is clean. Like, look around. He doesn't, it's not unhealthy, whatever. But she said, I need you to know this. So I try reaching out. I can't get an answer. I reach out to Clayton's support coordinator. He reaches out to her, and someone had filed a concern on him, and they were just going to have to work through the process, and we were just going to have to sit tight. So I am like, okay. The lady makes the appointment to come over. And it was like 2 days later. So she sits down with Clayton, and Clayton, being Clayton, just says, yeah, well, yes, I dropped my pills, but my mom said that was okay. And what he didn't say was the nurse's station was involved in that and did it. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh. So like, so there was like 3 or 4 things. One thing is that he had been in a car accident recently, and he had backed into something 2 years before. It wasn't recently. There was no damage on his vehicle, but this person reported that he had been in a car accident. And this is the information I'm getting, that he was driving under the influence of medication, which was Dayquil. He had been in a car accident, and that it's not safe for him to live on his own. And so I finally get in touch with the DCF person, who explains to me his house is clean. I talked to your son. He seems fine. And meanwhile, I had sent her, for every question that he told me they asked, I'm answering. And it just so happened, when she came to meet with him a second time, the support person was there too, that we have come in. So she was able to ask her, like, how many days a week are you here? And she said 2, maybe 3. It depends what he needs for that week. Work is a support for him. She was able to communicate. To make a long story short, it took about a month and a half to get it knocked out. And they found it for no cause. Part of the biggest thing for me was the realization that as an adult, when I think of the Department of Children and Families being involved, it's against the parent. So I'm thinking, my gosh, there's not another parent out there, which I'm sure there are, that are as plugged in, as involved, and have done to make sure that everything's good. Like I have everybody, lined up. So I took it like, oh my gosh, what else could I have done? And the senior investigator explained to me, this isn't about you, it's about him. He's an adult. And we had just gone through the process to have his guardianship removed, because he, for 2.5 years, is doing everything on his own. He's paying for himself. He's a 401k, or whatever you call a 503b or something. He pays for his insurance. He pays for his food. He's paying for his electric. He's living on his own. So we had done that. Therefore, it didn't come back to us. It went on him. And so the other thing is, who on earth who's worked with him would have used that avenue to try to help him? Like, where would they think that reaching out, if they had these concerns, to DCF, which, had his house not been cleaned, maybe had his support not been there, maybe his interview didn't go so well, they have the right to they have the right to find that he shouldn't be living alone, that he shouldn't be driving. that he can't take care of himself, and they can pull those rights away from him through the system because he's a danger to himself. And who knew that could happen? Because I didn't know that could happen.
Yeah, so
I felt like I had, covered every base as a parent that I could cover for him in just everything, making sure that all the supports and the checks and balances and communication and everything. And never in my wildest dreams, this was a complete blind spot for me. And on our family, it was about 8 weeks, 8 weeks of, 10 weeks of total turmoil, trying to figure out what's the next step if this happens. Like, does he get to retain his job? Does he get to keep working? If we have to move him into like a group home type setting, what happens there? And so once Clayton was cleared, we pulled for a public request, to be able to see what the complaint was. And the bottom line is, they said he had gotten locked in the elevator at work, and it was traumatic for him. So it was so traumatic, I never heard about it. I'm just saying, which I don't know how they knew that. They said that he had a chimney. He loves to do little fires. So versus doing an open fire pit, we have a chimney for him. And he put stuff in there, and he put cardboard in the chimney. That was in the report. I still, again, I've seen a ton of 20-year-olds. And the funny thing is, with his chimney, he had a hose right there, like drawn out to where he would sit in the backyard, surrounded by nothing, no trees, not the house. He was in the middle of rocks by the water, had a chimney. And that he drove under the influence of Dayquil, that he had been in an accident, and that no one was checking on him, and that he had autism, and that he was at risk because of having autism. He should not be living on his own, which is mind-blowing to me, because everything we've done has been to create an environment and work with everybody. To allow independence to its fullest. Let somebody hit their, where they can get, what's your potential? I'm not going to hold you back. You're different, but you're not less. You can do it. Don't look at the label, look at the able, all of those wonderful things. And that's what I've done with every child or adult that I've ever been involved with. Don't get hung up on what you can't do. Get hung up and continue what you can do and backfill the can'ts.
Right.
And not everybody's potential is the same. But if you give up because somebody has autism, you'll never know what their potential is. You will never know.
Right. And Clayton has been an inspiration for the autism community and for special needs community in general for all along. So, but I want to ask a question because I'm not clear on this. So basically DCF, which we thought it is Department of Children and Families Services. I thought it was for children, but because our children, how can they still go in? Like, they don't go and check on other 25-year-olds, right?
Because they reported he was disabled, which Clayton doesn't claim being disabled. So we functionally, he can do anything. The way that he thinks is different.
Right.
So, and autism is considered a disability. And in many ways, it can hinder what you're able to do. Clayton has, I don't know, I want to say pushed through that. He doesn't want to be told he can't do something because he has autism.
Right.
He wants to show, and he's going to try to do everything he can. And what all we could do was attempt to make sure it's safe for him. You know, for instance, he drives 5 miles back and forth to work. He drives to the grocery store. He drives to that school, which is in Stock Island. It's not in Key West. So if he's got an event in Key West or, marathon or something, he's driven. We don't have you go. And it's limitations that we collectively spoke about, walked through with him, drove in Key West, and there's side parking, bicycles, pedestrians, one-way roads, etc., and discussed why this is hard for me. And I've been driving for, 40 years, 45 years. I would prefer you not do this. I don't think it's safe for you. And he's like, no, I don't want to drive here. So he makes those choices. He's involved with the Autism Society of the Keys, which does a tremendous amount of events down here and a lot of awareness stuff. Clayton's helped teach the Monroe Sheriff's Office about autism and what it looks like. This Friday, he's teaching the first responders for the fire departments for Monroe County about what autism is and what it looks like. He's joined them for family events, for outings, etc. They arrange, if it's not in his zone, to pick him up. And he's fine with that. He recognizes that it's better for him to do that than not do that. He can make those choices and those decisions. I don't have to make them for him. But he's, in reality, is there a disability? There is a different way of thinking. He doesn't necessarily process the same. And so,
but how would you prevent this? I mean, we can't really, oh
my gosh,
we can't prevent other people from making phone calls. It's kind of like my friend said when I was discussing it with her. She said, when a good Samaritan is not good for our kids, right? I mean, they think what they're doing is good, but they're really messing up,
Well, and the way that it was presented was this person was his savior, saving him from himself and anything that could happen. He wasn't capable because he's disabled and has autism. And ultimately, we don't know who made the complaint, but it's someone that thought they were acting in his best interest. And the only thing, when I did have that conversation, they had a conversation with their employees that was like, if you ever have a question, his parents are so plugged in, bring it forward. We'll bring it to the parent. If you have a concern, let's talk about it and we'll make sure we loop them in because they are. So if it happened there, hopefully it wouldn't happen again. The investigator was as tactful as she could be because she's an investigator and has to be blind. When she walks into a scenario, test the theory, right? This hypothesis I've been given, and then look at what's there. And it wasn't there. It was completely unfounded. And not only was it unfounded, in her write-up, she spoke to all of the supports that were in place and that, the involvement and the community involvement, the work involvement, the every bit of involvement, and that this just was not an accurate complaint, and said to me, like, I don't know why someone would do that. I don't know why someone would say that. Unfortunately, if someone brings something like that forward, because there are real cases, we have to do our job. She was, for me, being that mom that was like, deer in the headlights. How did I miss this one? She was a great person to work with, and ultimately, again, cleared him and made it clear to anybody else. So if someone does complain and they pull up the next, they will see everything. She communicated with several people, but how frightening. Like, I don't want to say I'm super plugged in to the, autism community, the supports. positive behavior supports. I worked with Virtus Health at the time, in ABA, like all of those things, the med waiver system, the everything, like all of those systems I'm aware of that a lot of families aren't. And so navigating through this, yes, it was very stressful, tenuous, nerving, etc. But I knew ultimately, like, we had done everything. Imagine that family that missed a few things. Right. And what they would feel. And, not everybody's going to have their child live 6 hours from them alone. I mean, that's a leap of faith every day for us. And every day I'm more and more and more comfortable with that decision, because he's happy. He is living his best life. He is happy. And who should say that he shouldn't be allowed to live his best life because he has autism?
Right.
Or live with mom and dad for the rest of his life.
Right. Right.
Would they want to live with their mom and dad for the rest of their life? I know plenty of 25-year-olds that are still living at home. Clayton left at 19 and never looked back.
I know, that's fantastic. So what would you like for parents that want to eventually, and I know that I'll just use myself as an example. Clayton is very high functioning compared to my daughter. Not that she can't do some of those things, but I don't know, like driving is probably not, in her cards. However, I would probably be looking into apartment living for her. And I can see that sometimes, she'll have to have support. How would you navigate? Like, is there anything, did you do anything like go and talk to the neighbors? I mean,
yeah, I mean, those neighbors were our, that was the other thing. They said that Clayton rode out the hurricane alone, which the plan was when the neighbor leaves, the neighbor brings Clayton with them, but the neighbor didn't leave. The neighbor stayed there. And the neighbor worked with Clayton to move his vehicle up on the bridge and bring him home. And I was in contact with Clayton the entire time and the neighbor. And the hurricane it's the one that hit Fort Myers. So they knew that it wasn't coming. And they were like, we're not going to get on the road. That'll be more dangerous. We'll be here with him. So again, we put those things in place. And we thought we had done well. And through that storm, while it was down there, I'm having him send me pictures. Where's your water level? How's your underneath? He had shutters all around. I don't even think it was a Cat 1 down there, because it went further west than what they thought it was going to do. So it really wasn't as big of a deal that was reported. What would I do differently? And I haven't done yet. And honestly, in talking to you, it would be doing like education. I thought by those people that Clayton works with, senior people that Clayton worked with, I've had a multitude in-depth conversations with them. They know him. They're very comfortable in him. Clayton dives. And they say he's one of the best divers because he's so focused on the rules and what needs to be done. Right. So that's part of having autism. Those things that he likes, he's up here on. Those things that he has no interest in, he's way below ability on. That's just autism. Right. So in all reality, I think maybe having come in, I never thought about it because of how much he's been embraced. I never thought about like doing a training or sending somebody in to do an educational thing ahead of it. I don't think they ever thought that. I never thought about that with a neighbor. I can't do that in the Winn-Dixie down here, which is the grocery store to shop in. I don't know. I still don't know the who or what, but the way to get through that is through education. Right. And through enrichment and through, we believe we've given our phone number. I mean, posted on a sign outside his front door. If you have any questions, call me. I mean, I don't know what to do. I honestly, you cannot control the mind of another who believes they're being a savior and not understand all of the ramifications that they created for him that could have totally changed the trajectory of his life.
Yeah. And that's the scary part. And how often
And how often does that happen?
Right.
I have no idea.
Well, I mean, I think that we all
find out.
I mean, you and your husband are great advocates. You've done a great job with him. But how many of us, like I always use your saying, like get out of protection mode and into potential mode. But how many of us as parents, have that guard up because we're afraid, like we're afraid to do, I mean, we're afraid for them, not, I mean, just because the world's not necessarily nice. So I think you're right. It is more education. We have to kind of let people know that, it might be big, more trainings around people so that the word gets out, I mean, like
it's that. And I think that, there's so much that goes along with autism. And for so long, it was autism awareness. We're living in autism acceptance and autism inclusion now. We're out of the awareness stage. And the acceptance is understanding that this person is just like you and me. Mm-hmm. They have wants, they have desires, they have dreams, they have goals. They have those things, or they can have those things if you get them to their potential, right? They can have those things. They might not look like ours, but they're allowed to have those things. And the way it doesn't look the same, they're not wired the same. So to judge them on you isn't in your belief system or how you're wired. Would you do that to some other 25-year-olds that decided maybe not to go to college and to, work odd jobs around and live at home? Would you say that's detrimental to them? Gosh, that's not good for them. No, it's different than you, though. Why are they allowed to do what they do different from you? But because someone has autism, they can't. The poor DCF lady. I mean, I think I like vomited out all this words to her. Well, we have this and we have that and we've done this and we have that. And I have a support here and I have a support there. And he just went to the doctor. He just got this. He just did that. Like, thank God, I just had him do an annual physical that showed him in perfect health and everything was good. Yes, he had a cold, a month ago, but he doesn't have a cold now. And he's in great physical. You can look at him. He works outdoors. He dives. He's very physically fit, so, and she even said to me about the medication thing. She's like, she said, they're a 25-year-old doesn't have to take medicine if they're sick. They can choose not to. So he should have that same right as any 25-year-old.
Right.
If he doesn't take medicine. It shouldn't be something so don't worry about that conversation. He has the same rights as anybody else. So she was coming at it with a view, is he really, or is this, somebody overstepping? And at the end, it was somebody overstepping. Thank goodness. But I mean, you hear handled it perfectly as far as I'm concerned. And I do believe that they have a tough job to navigate through that and what it looks like. But ultimately, Clayton proved that his wanting independence is for a good reason, because he can do it.
Reilly, thank you so much for sharing with us today your experience and your wisdom of what you've learned raising your son, Clayton. And thank you all for tuning in and listening to this podcast and staying with us until the end. And in case no one has told you today, you are doing a great job. Be good to you, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.